All right, everyone. The state of Vermont is not exactly known for its violent crime rate. Our gun crime rate is exceptionally low. Like, there is no gun crime problem within the state of Vermont, but leave it to the Vermont legislature to be dumb enough to think that we need to fix what ain't broke. Despite the fact that unlike maybe, I don't know, an inner city area or a blighted state of California that, is overrun by gangs and cartels and therefore has high gun crime, has a lot of inner city problems, a lot of slums, Vermont's not like that, and so we have the good educational system. We have possibilities for those that are young. We have a good mental health system, relatively speaking. We have, generally speaking, that side of Vermont works. Now, we pay through the nose for it, but it certainly does suppress the crime rates. Most of the time, if someone in Vermont is shot, and it wasn't a suicide, it was probably a hunting accident. It has nothing to do with all this uber scary stuff that people talk about. The thankfully rare school shootings, or the thankfully rare non-gang related shootings, I should say, in general. Most shootings in this country, gang member and a handgun. Quite literally, if you take care of the inner city gang problem, you wouldn't have most of the gun crime in the U.S., but we keep waging the drug war, which is dumb. But the Vermont legislature, again, leave it to them to do stupid things, thinks that we need to raise the age to buy a gun to 21, which, by the way, is unconstitutional. The state of Vermont is wasting its time bothering. The first time that a 20-year-old goes to the gun shop and says, hey, I want a rifle. No, you can't have a rifle. Okay, well, I'm suing the state of Vermont because this is unconstitutional. They will win. It'll be just like in Oregon and Florida. It won't work. You can't deprive someone who has achieved the age of majority of their constitutional right. Another part is the universal background check component. Okay, that's wonderful. You see, that's not going to affect person-to-person sales. It's not going to affect sales that happen outside of the state. It's not going to affect most of the guns that are actually sold. Okay, put more of a burden, again, on Farmer John, who, is totally lawful, will follow the law, and says, okay, well, I got to conduct a fucking background check on this dude I'm giving a shotgun out of the back of my pickup. Okay, wonderful. See, that's not going to stop gun crime. No, it's simply not. It's not going to do anything. Then they say, oh, well, we'll take a look at magazine size. Maybe anything with more than 10 bullets in it, maybe we'll ban those too. Okay, that's not a firearm. That's a magazine. It's also not actually enforceable. What are you going to do? Go door to door to round up all those evil, larger magazines that people bring over from New Hampshire or whatever? By the way, there's another looming problem. Can I just look, longer into the future instead of just in the present? Because it seems like hindsight's always 20/20. But a lot of people, they look at a little bit at the past, but ultimately they're just reactive in the present. They don't think about the future. They don't think about the past much at all. Future even less. 5-10 years from now, Free State Project exists in New Hampshire. More and more people are moving there, specifically with an eye to overrun the state with people who want less and less government, especially at the state level. What's going to happen when they decide to rip up all of their existing state-level gun control completely? Because they probably will at some point. I think New Hampshire will probably resist gun control more than Vermont. And by the way, why do we need gun control at all in Vermont? We have virtually none. I think the suppressor ban that we did have, didn't that get thrown out finally? So that we had basically, the only weapon-related law of any import that we have is basically, it regards switchblade knives. The blade can't be more than 3 inches on a switchblade. Everything else is apparently totally legal. It's like, yeah, you can walk around with your assault rifle, so-called, and it's fine. You can open carry, you can concealed carry. It's constitutional carry state, the first one. You can do whatever you want. Despite this, we have, the unregisterable amounts of actual violent crime within the state. It's a very safe state, so why are we trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist? Okay, maybe in some other state they have a problem because their citizens can't be trusted or something. It's not the state of Vermont, okay? And the Second Amendment quite clearly binds the states to the Second Amendment applies to the states, not just to the federal government. That's already been decided by the Supreme Court. Your age ban won't work. Any mental health ban will be thrown out because it's almost certain to be too expansive. It's almost certain to be arbitrary, stupid, and unconstitutional. Going after the magazines, I can see a day when the Supreme Court shoots that down too, and you can't enforce that. Look, we're moving in a more pro-liberty direction post-Cruikshank. Again, let me elucidate for any fellow Vermonters that may watch this and may not know. Gun control in the United States did not exist until a bunch of Southern Democrat Klansmen decided, oh shit, there are a bunch of black citizens now in the U.S. who are legally entitled to own guns. Well, we better make the argument that the militia within the Second Amendment only applies to the military. It doesn't, that is, that it's not a right for the average citizen to own a gun, it's a privilege, which of course is totally false. It's not the intent of the Second Amendment. It's been, shot down. The Cruikshank decision is dead. 1870s, Cruikshank decision is basically meant, under the Jim Crow era, to disarm a bunch of black people. That's how gun control began in the United States. Okay? That's the only reason that it existed. Nobody ever had an inkling in their mind that guns weren't meant to be held by private citizens, because who else was going to hold them at the time of the founding of the country? There was no standing military. The Continental Army was comprised of a bunch of volunteers that went back to their farms the second that the fighting was over. They owned their own weaponry. They maintained their own weaponry. They made their own ammo in some cases. That's exactly what the Second Amendment was meant to defend. It was meant to defend private citizens explicitly. The government doesn't have any right to own firearms. It's actually the government that has no constitutional mandate to own firearms. It's the people that have a constitutional mandate under the Bill of Rights to own firearms. We've got a modern military, whoop-de-doo, okay. I don't think the founders had nuclear subs in mind, because that's itself not a weapon, but simply a vehicle for them. As far as topical small arms, yeah, they should all be allowed, absolutely. In the state of Vermont, more or less they are. That's probably why we have low gun crime levels, because people are more polite. They realize, hey, 10 or 20 people that I pass on the street today are probably armed. Probably half these people are concealed carrying. Maybe I should go somewhere else to commit a crime. I should go over to New York to commit a crime because over there people are more disarmed. These Vermonters here are nuts. They have like guns everywhere. Yeah, there's a reason why the gangs stay away from the state. Good. Yeah, thank you. This is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing, which is we should be tearing apart all existing gun control in this country. All the other states should look more like Vermont on guns, not us trying to look like them. It's just keeping up appearances, by the way. It's not going to do anything. Look, the state legislature is aware that by passing this, it'll probably increase the violent crime rate. Criminals will no longer have quite so much of a reason not to commit crimes, with or without weapons, because they won't fear repercussion quite as much. So yeah, thank you for increasing the crime rate. And then you watch. 10 years that they pass this. Let's say the courts don't immediately tear it apart, which I hope that they do. I hope that some activist court within Vermont needs to take up the case, declare it all unconstitutional, say, no, gun control of these kinds is not allowed. Not going to happen in the state of Vermont. It's ridiculous. What's going to happen 10 years down the road is that violent crime in this state will be higher. And it'll be a direct result of the legislature today deciding, 19 and 20-year-olds can own a house, but they can't defend it with a gun. They can go get guns and go overseas and kill people, but they can't have a gun here. This makes total sense. Look, the very fact that anybody within a legislative body anywhere in the United States would think that that was logical should overrule them having an opinion at all on guns to begin with. They shouldn't even be talking about firearms. They obviously don't know what they're talking about. Absolutely. If they actually think that that is, number one, feasible, number two, constitutional, number three, sensible, they shouldn't have an opinion on firearms at all. They shouldn't be listened to because they're obviously off their rocker. So you're telling me most of the Vermont legislature is off its rocker. Not that we didn't know that. Meanwhile, Phil Scott says, well, I wouldn't, if an assault weapon ban were to come on my desk, I'd veto it. Which is like, oh, thanks, Phil. Like, yeah, what a big man you are. But all this other stuff I think I'll sign. By the way, they're instituting as well a policy whereby the police can seek a warrant from the court to confiscate someone's firearms who hasn't actually committed a crime based on an arbitrary judgment that they might commit a crime in the immediate future. They're a threat to other people. Also unconstitutional, maybe well-meaning in that case, but it's unconstitutional. It's also ripe for abuse. Absolutely it is. Some activist judge, some corrupt police officer, maybe the family doesn't like the individual and someone else wants to abuse them. Oh yeah, they're threatening me earlier. Yeah, you need to go and take his guns away. And then, the first time that happens and the person was not a credible threat, it's something got lost in the pipe, so to speak, and they shoot the police that are coming to try to take their firearms and they get exonerated because they're like, well, I did nothing wrong, and so, there was a false issuance of this warrant. Actually, the death is on the person who was claiming I was an imminent threat, which could be a cop themselves. It could be one of their family members. That's going to be an interesting case now, isn't it? Yes, the police are going to show up in the middle of the night, break down someone's door to confiscate their firearms, even though they haven't committed a crime. That person, because they haven't actually committed any crime, they're going to defend themselves. Because they're like, well, I've done nothing wrong. They're going to be like, oh, someone's breaking in. It's probably a burglar. Because they've done nothing wrong. They're not going to assume that it's the police right off the bat. We've had cases, I think there was a case in Indiana some years ago where a dude was exonerated because the cops, on a botched no-knock raid, busted down his door. He started firing, killed several of them. I think he got off because, like, well, number one, I didn't know it was the cops. I'm just figuring it's a break-in. Number two, I did nothing wrong. There never should have been a raid in the first place. We've had cases where someone gets raided, it's the wrong address. What happens if the Vermont State Police show up at the wrong house and bust down their door? You're putting those officers' lives on the line for absolutely no purpose whatsoever, on a mere whim of suspicion, based on an unconstitutional law in the first place. It's not constitutional. A person has the inalienable right to keep and bear arms. We're not talking about lunatics, okay, violent felons, someone who hasn't committed a crime, who's 19 or 20, they can't own a weapon. Someone who's got depression, well, the court might decide, well, that's a mental illness, so you can't own a weapon either. You're a threat to yourself and others because you have some arbitrary disorder. Oh, we're going to send the cops out on a bunch of raids to look for, people with the wrong kind of magazines. This sure won't put them in harm's way. It'll be just a wonderful time. The state legislature hasn't thought this through at all. State legislature's nuts. Phil Scott should veto the whole thing. He should say, okay, you want to expand it to universal background checks, you go ahead and have universal background checks. Not that it's really enforceable, but you go ahead and do that. Nothing that they are proposing, background checks, age limits, types of magazines, none of these things will stop a single shooting. They will only embolden criminals. That is a guarantee. The gun crime rate in Vermont will shoot right up over the next 10 years or so if the courts don't get involved, rule this all unconstitutional, say, what are you thinking? There's no gun crime problem in the state. There's no gun crime problem in Vermont. Okay, you go to Chicago, you go to a big blighted city run by a bunch of idiot inner city urbanite career politicians, then you can find gun crime problems. It's related to gangs. Doesn't involve, my expanded magazines. No, it doesn't involve an AR-15 or an AK-47 or whatever, a sporting rifle. No, it involves handguns. Yeah, there's your problem. There's 90% of the gun crime right there. What's not suicide anyway? You do realize that a large proportion of the gun crimes in the statistics are suicide anyway. That a large proportion of all the school shootings are single act or suicides or accidental discharge with no actual victim. Did you even know that? No, the state legislature, they looked at some meme online before they made these decisions. They don't want to be faced with reality. That's about all. Peace out.